for some Bengals news. At the Growler, we got you. Hot takes, interviews from your host, Paul Dano Jr.
All right, welcome into the latest edition of Rewatch Reaction. Paul Dano Jr., the Athletic, here with you with our great friend Charlie Goldsmith. Charlie, what's going on?
Paul, how you doing?
I'm doing great. I'm excited. You know why I'm excited? I love when we go to the dark places. Okay, when we decide we're gonna go deep. We've done that a lot on this show, and that's why I've enjoyed doing the video dives with you, and I've enjoyed the Rewatch Reaction edition to the suite of shows here. It's been fun to go deep, but this is when you know you're going deep, Charlie. When you say it's mid-February, it's cold outside, let's just watch a bunch of free agent guards and see what we think. Okay? Find the guard. We're going deep into February guard play, deep dive. Let's go.
You know, this is in the weeds, but hey, you know, we all don't want to watch Max Sharping against Kansas City again. You know, we forget how Max Sharping played in the 2022 AFC Championship game. No offense to Max, still in the league, you earned a job, but this stuff matters, and or it should matter if the Bengals kind of do the hard stuff right this offseason, and then maybe they could build a strong interior with their offensive line for the first time in a decade.
This stuff very much matters. Bengals fans know it all too well. In fact, no fan base probably gets more excited to go into February guard talk than Bengals fans, and that's why we're doing it. We're here for you, and this is kind of part of the beginning of our free agent approach series that we're going to dive into. Really the biggest, we're going to talk trenches. We're going to talk guards. We're going to talk about defensive line, prospects, edge, defensive tackle, what that really looks like in terms of what we know that the Bengals are going to be most attacking in free agency. Charlie, you had an awesome look at the guards last week in your chalkboard, which I hope people are subscribed to the chalkboard. If you're not, what are you doing? What are you doing? Be on the chalkboard. Did we go Chalkies? Did we go with Chalkies? Did we decide that was good?
I'm not a big
Chalk Pals. I'll let you steal off of us.
I'm not a big nicknames guy. We'll just go with Charlie's chalkboard readers.
And subscribers.
And subscribers.
And subscribers are here for you. He's giving it away for free over there. It's awesome stuff. And you did a true guard deep dive specifically into construction. What does winning guard play look like? Is really kind of a great place to start. Is that where you started?
Well, I started with what Joe Burrow told me to do, and he said, listen to what the Eagles are saying. And what Howie Roseman was talking about leading up to the Super Bowl was how he studies, you know, the top teams in the league. Everyone does this. The Bengals do this as well. And kind of following that rabbit hole, I made it bigger than four. The final 8 teams in the playoffs this year, the teams that made it into the divisional round, where did their guard play come from? Well, you'd expect the teams with the best guards, with the teams that threw the most resources at it. And you would be not just wrong, but completely 1,000% wrong, going in the wrong direction. You look at the teams that threw the most at guard, who were in the Elite Eight. That was by far the Texans, who had $30 million plus a first-round pick at guard. And you had the Rams, who had, $33 million plus a second-round pick they invested at guard. You know, the Texans' offensive line was such a mess that they fired their offensive coordinator, and the Rams had a $17 million guard as a backup this year. Now you look at the best teams. Yes, I know the Chiefs, you know, offensive line crumbled in the Super Bowl, but they had a 6th-round pick and an undrafted free agent playing guard. You had the Eagles turning Mekhi Becton from nothing into something legitimate. You had the Bills sign David Edwards to be a backup in 2023. He ends up starting, and he ends up being a solid piece for them. Nick Allegretti in Washington, a backup in Kansas City. You know what? You found something there. And then you had teams kind of doing mid-tier stuff like the Lions, who had Glasnow and Zeitler making $6 million a year apiece. But the common trend is, sure, you can, you know, throw money at it, but the teams that are going to do this the best are the teams that are going to be able to pluck, identify, scout, and develop guys that aren't going to be breaking the bank.
Yeah. You know, I kind of had a similar thought, and then there's a lot of crossover here, but you go into PFF's just top graded, just to generalize top graded offensive lines, how they had them at the end of the year. And there is some, you know, you're going to see investment, like the Detroits of the world spend. Denver went out and really invest. They extended guys, but you know, they extended guys that were mid-round picks that they turned into something, but they were willing to pay them. but there's not a lot of like went out there, made the big free agent splash, top first round pick, and look at our line go and look at the success that we're having as a team. There's very few examples, and that's not to say it's not good to invest in the line. There's just clearly so much more to it than that. I mean, and it's a value of offensive line coach thing. Enter Scott Peters here for the Bengals and part of this conversation. And I think that's part of why he's here and why Frank Pollock is not here. The Bengals continue to, as they have seemingly forever, look for an offensive line coach that can give you a semblance of what the Jeff Stoutland, Dante Scarnecchias, all these great offensive line coaches, Mike Munchak, right, of the world, have been able to do in certain places. And that is take these guys, develop a third or fourth round pick into somebody that's worth paying near the top of the market and keep them there like Quinn Miners, or take Mekhi Becton and they move him into guard and find a star there and all of this stuff. Like, that's so much of what this is. It's really startling how little of the go pay top of the market, use top picks on guard, succeed, profit, right? There's just not a lot of that.
I think this tells you everything you need to know. The Chiefs, all they're talking about now in Kansas City is fix the line, fix the line, fix the line. The Chiefs are going to let Trey Smith walk because when you look at needs and positional priority, instead of paying and retaining the top guard on the market, they're going to let him sign with somewhere else, because the way you build a line is, like we're saying, not through throwing the most resources at the league with the Chiefs, which the Chiefs have a chance to do. That's just not how the position works in the league. And follow the Chiefs, the team that's done it the best. Follow the Eagles, the team that brought in, Landon Dickerson coming off a torn ACL in the second round and had Becton come in as well. Follow what the best teams are doing. And I think the Trey Smith example especially shows, yes, they're paying Joe Tooney in KC, but are they going to give Joe Tooney a third contract after he's up this year? The Chiefs are probably about to be in the same position in a year or two that the Bengals are in now at offensive guard. So either you're good at it or you're not. And it kind of is a more even level playing field when you look at it that way.
The Bengals were not.
Yes.
And we can say that. We can say that with clarity. Cordell Volson, of course, he ends up getting benched during the year. He's going to have to take a jump and to be a part of anything here and hold on, because he has a $3.6 million salary cap savings that the Bengals would get if they let him go by not making this team. They'll give him every opportunity to in camp and see where that lands. The other side, Alex Kappa, the wheels have fallen off for Alex Kappa. Unfortunately, I think a series of injuries, which he dealt with this year and was part of his level of play. But I think we've seen multiple years now a regression that's happening there. And what you hear internally from the Bengals is we're going to be adding there, and probably adding in a fairly significant way. It certainly feels like free agent and draft pick involved, not necessarily premium draft pick, maybe. Also a lot of love for some of the guys they have in house that could maybe be part of the answers, the Jackson Kirklands of the world and the Cody Fords of the world, who's not in house yet, but presumably they'll be able to bring back reasonably, and like to see what he looks like actually getting to play guard, because they really liked his personality and his play style last year for them. So there's options for what they can do at both of these guard spots. And it's Ted Karras is going to be there at center this year. You have Matt Lee behind him as a backup center. I don't see you're like weird clamoring of play Matt Lee, move Karras to guard. Like, I think there's an emergency scenario where things like that get considered, but that's not anything that you're talking about right now in February. I think you're just looking at a Royal Rumble for one position amongst, the guys they have in house, a day two, maybe draft pick, and a low level free agent. And the other side being this year's Alex Kappa. I feel like that, and I think that's where we need to probably center our discussion, Charlie, is who is this year's Alex Kappa, the guy that they pinpointed before free agency began and somehow managed to knock a deal out in like 10 seconds. And the moment that the tampering period was able to start, because this is the type of thing we're looking for. He's not top of the market, but he's exactly what we're looking for in the middle. Let's overpay that a little bit to assure we get our guy and have a starter. And that was a success. I don't care what anybody says about what Kappa has been. That deal and the Karras deal were a success. That strategy was a success. They should be looking to replicate it again with that type of player. I think that's probably where our discussion goes.
If Kappa doesn't get hurt, the Bengals win the Super Bowl in 2022. And Kappa had a very, very nice season. Kind of a small step back in 2023, major regression in 2024. Like, kind of when I knew it with him was when Shelby Harris gets the 4th and 3 sack against Alex Kappa in Cleveland. Like, but hey, you have a good run and you move on. Something that I think is critical as well is the importance of a day 2 pick. They haven't tried that since Jackson Carman. And of course, that was the failure of the decade. But you look at the Eagles, they have 2 day 2 picks. The Bills had a day 2 pick. The Commanders had a day 2 pick. The Ravens had a day 2 pick plus a 4th round pick. The Rams had a day 2 pick. The Bengals were other than the Chiefs, if you would lump them in as the 9th team with the Elite 8 that I was talking about, other than the Chiefs, they had the least invested in the guard position, even though they were paying Kappa about $10 million. We're on the same page here. The plan that we'll kind of break down here going forward is Alex Kappa 2.0, $6 to $10 million. I like a day 2 pick. I haven't looked at those guys yet, but there are always guards available in that range. I like some pre-draft insurance, kind of like a tier 3 Cody Ford-ish. We'll talk about these guys too. I'm calling this the 2025 Trent Brown for $2 to $5 million. And then have that guy compete with your pick, compete with Volson. Not as high on Kirkland, but you forgot Andrew Stuber as well in your offensive guard Royal Rumble projection.
Well, it's like if you ever, for our wrestling people out there, if ever is a Royal Rumble, there's always like the first guy comes out, he's a big name, right? But you got to fill, if there's 30 guys coming out, like number 11 comes out and you're like, oh, I forgot about him. Like, yeah, he's out there. It's like he's one of the guys. He's only wearing the singlet. He gets tossed over the ropes pretty quickly. I think that's my view on Stuber, but I appreciate it. I hope the best for him. Hope the best for Stuber. Okay, so let's say this. Here's an interesting thing. PFF has their top 100, and I'm using this generally, not the be all end all. I know you tape grinders are out there, and you're like, I've got my list. All right, that's all I need to know. That's fine. I'm going to go generally off PFF. They do the work. Okay, they have 11 guards in their top 100 free agents. That's a big number for that position to be up there, including number 2 overall in Trey Smith, who you mentioned earlier. We can cross him off. The Bengals are not going to go to the top of the market at guard. And as I think we just kind of outlined, they shouldn't. After him, you have Will Fries from Indianapolis, who had a tibia injury last year. What's your view on Fries? They have a projection of $14 million a year. So I would say that'd be the reason I'm already crossing him off as a place that they wouldn't go unless that projection is way off and the injury is too scary for people. What was your view of Fries?
I love the tape. It was limited because of the injury. But when you look at what he did in pass protection, also notably in a similar crossover scheme to what the Bengals run. Remember what we said about Zach Moss and how the shotgun approach, the carryover from Indianapolis to Cincinnati. Fries holds up versus power. He executes well on pass offs and versus games at the line of scrimmage. He's a pass pro guy. He doesn't get skated backwards. He's very aware. And again, the shotgun focus was something I really liked as well. He was a stabilizing presence in Indianapolis's offense. He was a guy who was probably going to be headed for not maybe a major payday, but a really nice payday before the injury. And something I'm very interested to get into here, very interested to see in free agency is everyone, though, has an asterisk by their name. And with Fries, it was, the tibia injury that ended his season. That was very significant. There aren't the home run, except for Trey Smith. Like, there was a much bigger tier at the top of free agency last year. There were 5 contracts of at least $16 million a year for guards last year, and 2 more multi-year deals of $8 million plus. Fries, what's he going to be in the 8 to 10 range? The injury probably drops that down a bit. Or is the guard trend from 2024 carrying over into 2025 and ballooning prices? I wouldn't want to follow that if I were the Bengals, but if Fries is available at kind of a bargain Oregon because of the injury history. That could be your Mekhi Becton, a guy who had a question with Fries. It would be the injury that you would kind of be taking a chance on getting him for cheaper because there is a lot to like with how he'd fit with the Bengals.
I don't know if you have this in front of you, but out of curiosity, who were those top deals last year?
Hunt signed 5 for $100 with the Panthers.
Right.
Lewis signed 4 for $53 with the Panthers because Carolina was like, man, Bryce Young's short. We need to solidify the interior of the pocket.
Mm-hmm.
Jackson signed 3 for $51 in LA. He became a backup. Dotson 3 for $48 in LA. I think I had him ranked, or PFF, if I remember the number correctly, had him ranked in the 50s in pass protection grade this season. That's Mike Onwenu, who was Scott Peters' only viable lineman in New England. John Runyon 3 for $30 in New York with the Giants. Cleveland 3 for $24 with Jacksonville.
Yeah. So, not exactly guys that if you look at the top of the list of performances from this year that you really see. I was just curious to know what those names are and keep those in mind when you think about, go to the top of the market here with some of these guys. Fries is a really interesting one to see how many people are after him if he gets anything near. If he ends up back in that under 10 range, I certainly see the Bengals maybe wanting to get involved. But we go down this. I want to group together something here before we go too specifically, because I think there's a couple of different groups. Zach Martin, Kevin Zeitler, Brandon Scherff, older guys. Where do we stand on older guys? That's kind of the question here is when you look at those three, can you go for the 1-year deal? And they got one more. He's got one more in me. The Vince Carter meme. I got one more in me, right? I just feel like, is that viable? Or is that playing with fire and you're just asking for someone to come in and have a Trent Brown season where they're hurt immediately and it's over, because that's it. That's what the fire that you're playing with. You're trying to win games in January. Okay. And taking your chances with guys that have been hurt recently. And now Zeitler's been, unbelievable. He's the workout warrior that he is. He's been Iron Man in the way that he's been able to continue his career going after being the last good Bengals lineman drafted, arguably. Where do you go with that? It's a risk, but the payoff is huge if they can manage to sustain one more good year.
Everyone's got something. That's the thing I'll keep saying about this class. And for some guys, that would be age. And hey, the Lions are a really smart team, and who was maybe aside from Mekhi Becton, or even if with Mekhi Becton, the best free agent guard signing of the offseason last year might have been Kevin Zeitler in Detroit on a 1-year, $6 million deal. What I view on guards is, it's kind of a canned answer, but every story is different, and it's about kind of how they look and what you've seen. I saw very different things from Brandon Scherff and Kevin Zeitler. Brandon Scherff, one, his durability is incredible. This guy posts, he doesn't miss games. I know he's old, but when you look at the injury concerns, the wheels falling off, etc., the terms you might use, he still plays, to borrow a Frank Pollockism, very salty. He's a great pre-snap communicator. He's aware. He's looking for someone to hit. I wrote down he's more stout and annoying than overpowering. He isn't showing a lot of a range or lateral ability or getting downhill, but that's fine with the Bengals scheme. Press Taylor coached him in Jacksonville. I have him pretty high up on my kind of tier 2 list as well for Bengals guards. Zeitler, he had a nice pass block win rate, and it was a good sign for where he's at athletically that Detroit sets up most of their D game with under center play action. That includes a lot of movement from the offensive linemen. He had range for an old guy, but he wasn't a game changer, certainly. He was more an X on the board than anything else. And then he just didn't have a lot of experience on an island drop back in pass pro because of what Detroit ran. That's not his fault. But Zeitler kind of hasn't done that for a while. I'd feel safer with Scherff. And then Martin, to be honest, I kind of think he'll just retire and go back to Dallas. So I didn't spend a lot of time on him.
Yeah, that seems fair. It's fun to think about. We saw Tyron Smith last year was sort of like, is he gonna where's he at the end? He ends up landing with the Jets. He actually does leave Dallas and goes and plays there. Martin, he's been really through it injury wise a little bit, but you think about him, it's like, man, what you would do to have a prime Zach Martin, but that's not what you would be getting, and that's part of the asterisk of all this. I'm on board. I feel like if you give it the proper insurance, and I think that's kind of the play here, is if you really do believe what you say, And okay, you go Cody Ford and another of the bargain type guys that could turn into something for you, and throw up day 2 into it. You do that, and then it's really not that big of a risk taking a shot at somebody like Sheriff and saying, "Hey, maybe he can get through." Because if you can, boy, you've got a real stability there to put in between, say, Mims and Karras, and you love that. But eh, if you don't give it proper insurance, then you're not playing. You would have to go hand in hand with something else, and it probably kicks up your priority level on guard in the draft. And is that something you can afford to do when you're trying to do everything you're trying to do with the defensive line and all the other needs that you're going to have?
Yeah, the last time they had to draft something on day 2 of the draft was Zach Carter. And that was a pick. They felt like they needed another defensive tackle after they didn't address it, and they forced it there and they didn't pan out. I very much like the idea of pre-draft insurance for them. And what's nice about this class too is there very much is a delineation between the guys who are your plug and play starters and your guys who know that they're just going to be going to any camp around the league competing for a spot. So everyone kind of knows what bucket they fall in. You can build it like you build a baseball bullpen and just surround it with a bunch of guys who do different things and have different looks. And hopefully in the aggregate, enough of it clicks. So you kind of build yourself a net that way. None of this is going to be foolproof because, again, even the top of the market stuff isn't foolproof. And either you're good at this or you're not. I bet one of the big reasons the Bengals hired Scott Peters was he did do a pretty good job of this in Cleveland. Obviously he wasn't the head guy, but they had a nice track record of nice stories, guys coming from the practice squad or journeymen who ended up getting big deals. And then Michael Jordan and Ben Brown were starting for the Patriots last year, and Drake May survived. So that's a good feather in Scott Peters' cap. So maybe he is good at this. I guess we'll see, but this will kind of be the buckets he's looking at.
Yeah, Wyatt Teller is kind of one of the more famous stories of where he just kind of came from nowhere. Next thing you know, he's a thing in Cleveland. Other reclamation, not reclamation, but asterisks here. Teven Jenkins, a guy who was very popular in Bengals mock drafts when he came out that year. And people were mad that they didn't maybe go take a chance on. He's had a weird career there. The last 3 years, he hasn't played over 750 snaps any of those years. He's been pretty good when he's been in there, but that's been hard to keep him in there. And if people are going to be paying a premium for the level he has played at when healthy, is that a place that they're going to be wanting to go to when there's availability concerns? I don't know. I don't know if that's a direction they'd be willing to go. Are you on team Teven?
Teven is at the bottom of my tier 2 list, which he'll probably make close to top money of this tier 2 group. But we know exactly what the Bengals want in a guard. And this is probably, I should have said earlier, we know exactly what this scouting report is: durability, toughness, football IQ, communication, awareness, and a focus on pass pro. They're going to take the pass pro guy over the downhill blocker. Jenkins is a tools guy. Jenkins is almost like a Becton type project. But then when you turned on his tape in Chicago, I went through some of the Bears deep passes. It literally started off with a bad loss on a quick spin move, and then he got pancaked on the very next play. I wrote down plays where he didn't show awareness, plays where he wasn't trustworthy. Sometimes he was blocking no one. He has the strength to form a wall. He has the tools. He looks the part physically, but that's historically not where the Bengals have leaned when they've tried to take swings to specifically improve their line through free agency. And to an extent, outside of Mims, the draft as well, I don't see Jenkins as that much of a plug and play type with too much projection for me to be too comfortable with.
Which brings us to Mekhi Becton, and a name that is very familiar. There was a reason he was here, not the reason he's going to get paid. They viewed him as the Trent Brown guy. There was probably conversations in back rooms about maybe he could play guard. I don't know. But he was meant to be the tackle that was going to be the role that Trent Brown had. They ended up not going that direction. They didn't find it to be the match they wanted it to be. He ends up signing for $2.75, I believe, 1 year with Philly. They kick him into guard. He ends up awesome. He's one of the stories of their season. Jeff Stoutland strikes again. And now he's going to make, I don't know how much he's going to make. I'm really curious to see how much he's going to make, because leaning into his guard thing, he could be one of the biggest beneficiaries of this Eagles run in terms of percentage of salary gained of almost anybody. Put him there with Milton Williams and Josh Sweat with the way that he was able to play and find himself at guard. He certainly fits everything the Bengals would be looking for, right? Age, size, power. They got to know him a little bit last year where there was obviously enough interest there then. Now proof of concept, played well on a big stage. Like, you're starting to see maybe a maturation from this guy when you see him, crying and holding his kid, like, you just, all of that stuff. It feels like you could see them being like, all right, we're back in on the Becton game. And yet again, they're 1 year too late in making the right move, right? When we start talking about paying guys potentially, I could see it. But again, the most interesting market of all of these guys, in my opinion, how much will the league be influenced and now be believers in what Mekhi Becton is? And how much will Philly be like, yeah, and that's why we're not letting him leave?
Yeah, I have Becton 5th on my guard big board between Patrick Mekari in Baltimore and between Brandon Scherf coming from Jacksonville. Kind of like we were talking about Trey Smith too. Look at Philly. What does Philly do? Invest in the trenches. Well, are they going to keep Mekhi Becton, or are they going to try to play this game that you really should be playing, which is finding the next Mekhi Becton? And I mean, what an impressive story. What a nice season. The tape's good. You can see he's a wall. He shines as a downhill run blocker. Now, there were some inconsistencies, pass protection, twists, stunts, blitz, questions with how he handled all of that. Rushers could get under him, but he found a home. He's going to get paid. He's a guy who probably has more he can grow, more tools and upside to tap into. And that's great. And that's going to be a fit for a lot of teams, specifically probably a team that knows exactly what they are from an offensive line development perspective. I didn't have him ranked higher, even though he probably has the best tools and maybe even the best right now stock behind Trey Smith. I had him ranked lower because of the traits that the Bengals prioritize that I mentioned might not click and line up perfectly with Becton, who would be making, Alex Kappa money. It would be a bit of a major investment for that position, even though there's still some projection. And that gives me a little hesitation, but not enough hesitation to drop him any lower than 5th on my board.
So you mentioned Mekari. From Baltimore there. You're obviously very high on him. What is it about Mekari that stands out?
I like Mekari. What stood out the most was how often that Baltimore just asked him to be on an island. Like I went through a lot of these deep passing routes passing reps, pass pro reps on deep balls for all these guards. And Mekari seemed to be the only one that was blocking defensive tackles one-on-one with a lot of space around him. Other guys, it was more condensed offensive lines. There were more guys able to throw in an arm or a chip or an elbow at the line of scrimmage. Mekari, I mean, there was even one rep where he was just holding down the fort against Ed Oliver and the Bills, and that was really impressive. The versatility is huge. Here's that rep here. Lamar Jackson hikes the ball playing Buffalo. Yes, they're up by a bit, but there's Mekari out on an island when the pocket slides to the right. He's holding the fort against Ed Oliver, and he just consistently did that when I turned on the tape. Now, he's not Mekhi Becton. The tools aren't there. There's a reason he flew under the radar as long as he did. There's a reason he was a 6-man in Baltimore for as long as he was. But he's quick, he's lateral, he's athletic, he's a pass pro guy. And, if he's good enough for Baltimore's offensive line, maybe he's good enough for me. There's something to be said with that, considering that's one of the models that the Bengals are trying to emulate. He knows the division. He knows the AFC North style of play. And if you end up drafting his replacement, well, he can fill in at center. He can play tackle. He can do a lot of different things. I feel very good having Mekari in the mix.
Yeah, no, I mean, versatility is always going to be a part of this too, because you feel like maybe you have that with some other spots. A few more in that range, and I think we're in this, like, you could see this being the Bengals centerpiece range here. Mekari, Aaron Banks in San Francisco, Will Hernandez, who was with Arizona. You're Hernandez specifically with a pass pro specialty a little bit. You could see, okay, you can make that argument. You can see that being a direction that maybe they would go.
Banks, something I should have said to Mekari too, applies to Banks as well, is, I mean, they're winners. You look at what the Bengals did in 2020 and 2021, or 2022, Alex Kappa and Ted Karras have both been in Super Bowls. Like, there's something to that, and there's tangible value in bringing in those types of guys with that experience. Mekari add the winning experience into what I mentioned. Aaron Banks started a Super Bowl. He's even though he's missed a few games, he's probably the safest bet in this group. His motor runs really hard. He's pretty steady. He plays smart. Of all these guys, he was probably the most aware of where the pressure is coming from. Again, he's not an overpowering downhill, massive, bulldozing blocker, but he's reliable in pass pro. Again, similar to Fry's, a scheme carryover, some similarities between San Francisco and Cincinnati that have shown up over the last few seasons. He's sharp. He holds his own. He doesn't get pushed back. Again, the winning experience, the experience playing on an offensive line that has done some great things. A lot to like there. He and Mekari are my two favorite. They're the names I have starred on this big board.
Yeah, I think outside of that, let's talk about a little bit beyond that, the others, and this maybe could fall into that bin of Royal Rumble, maybe more. Okay. And you could win a starting job. We know Cody Ford is probably that type, and would be in that type of mix. I don't think anybody would have a problem with Cody Ford and another one of those, like throwing some more bodies at it. We'll see if that would be as aggressive as they would be, maybe a way that they would be aggressive with a couple of different swings like that. But Cody Ford is that type of player. For me, I look at Dalton Reisner in Minnesota, somebody who really did well. He kind of came in mid-season and became the guy for them. He was in Denver for a number of years. Pass block grade last year, top 10 in amongst all guards in the league. And that maybe you've got a guy, he's 29, going to be 30. So he's not old, but he's not young, but he's hungry. He's looking for a place where he probably isn't against going in and competing somewhere, assumes that he hasn't done enough to become the starting guy. I think you could get him at a very solid bargain price. And he could be the type of guy that could be like, hey, builds on what he did last year, got the confidence, and now he's a guy and could really go out there and do something for you. So I like that as the type of player to fit in there, but there's others. Who you got?
There are a lot of even types of bigger risks here. That's why they're, this tier 3 and not necessarily tier 2. My favorite in this group is Ben Bredeson. He started last year in Tampa. He was in New York before that, bounced around the league, was on a 1-year, $3 million deal, and then became a starter this year and just had a really boring season. Sure, there were some notable plays where he just got out-athleted, but he packs a punch. He has some power. He was a 2-time captain at Michigan. It seems like he has great intangibles. Those are the kinds of guys who you always like having around, almost like a spare, you know what I mean? A spare tire. And Ben Bredeson is much more than that, who is a pretty solid, consistent piece. Cody Ford, we could all see him returning, to stress again what he could do in this tier. An interesting guy maybe in this tier, kind of more towards the risk, would be James Daniels. I'm generally very anti bringing guys who had just torn their Achilles, and he was more of a run blocker, but an experienced starter with AFC North experience who was pretty solid and proven and established in the league and has winning experience as well. Could be kind of like a different type of risk, maybe more of an upside play. And then Will Hernandez as well, I'd throw in that camp coming off the torn ACL. I pulled up a quote from John Gannon, the Cardinals head coach. He's playing really good ball for us before the injury. He's an integral part to our toughness and our attitude, doing things the right way, practicing the right way, and playing the right way. And if you're going to take a risk, I'd like to take a risk on that kind of guy.
Yeah, no, that seems like the type that would fit. All right. I think, for me, end game, we're sitting here in training camp. We're talking about, gonna see how insert guy from that middle tier that we talked about does, whether you're talking about one amongst the older group like a Sheriff or maybe Will Fries, who his bargain came down. You felt like you got a great deal there, and see how he fits. And then we're gonna be, what we're gonna be doing, Charlie? We're going to be watching the guard battle play out yet again, like guard battle year 10, right? It just feels like over and over and over again, we're always watching to see who's going to come out on top in a battle there. But I think, I think Cody Ford is back. I just think both sides are going to be motivated to do that. I think Cody felt like he found a home here. The Bengals feel like they found a type of player here they could trust, and he's the baseline. Like, to me, he is the baseline. Everything they do is about trying to get better than Cody Ford in a draft pick with somebody they pick off the other bottom tier if they add on top of that. But it's like, worst case scenario, Cody can go do it, right? But he's a great 6. Okay, you love having him as number 6. And I think that's kind of, when we look at the big picture view of where this thing lands, I think that's a good view of it. I'm curious. We'll see if you get your guy. I don't know. So are you're officially a Mekari guy? Is that like your official designation here?
With my mock off-season spreadsheet, I'd have Mekari. That would be my, one more time. You got Mekari to be Alex Cappa 2.0. You got a day 2 draft pick. I'll go with Bredesen as Trent Brown 2.0, but guard. And then kind of you have him compete with Volson and the rookie and see what happens. And, you mentioned training camp. A joke I've made to you before is the day after the second preseason game, I call Jackson Carman Memorial Moving Day, because that's the day where Carman would always go from the first team to the third team for 3 straight years. So after the second preseason game, we'll go on the mic. We'll discuss who's now going to be sometimes even a 4th teamer in Carman's case and see who's moving.
Or maybe this is the year that the story we all tell is Scott Peters and Cordell Volson have just meshed, and it's all coming together. So many different places this can end.
I now realize I didn't have Carman on my total guard free agent list. Like, he didn't even make the list. So sorry, Jackson.
No.
You were
Sorry,
in the NFL
Jackson.
last year.
There's a lot of places that Jackson could end up working this year, and the only place I can guarantee that it isn't is the Cincinnati Bengals. All right. Thanks, everybody, for listening. We appreciate it. We will talk to you next time. Thanks, Charlie.